Dieselgate, Wirecard, Heckler Koch. Germany has one of the weakest whistleblower protection laws in the developed world, but not for long, thanks to campaigners like Veronika Nad. Veronika comes on the show to explain why the German government is slowing everything down, again, and what it's like trying to get the European Union to listen to you. Make it happen. We have a small correction on the story involving the date of Maltese journalist Daphne Caruana Galicia's death. Veronika says this didn't happen during the European Parliament's vote on the whistleblower protection law itself, as she says on the show, but on the European Parliament's vote on the initial report on the law, which happened a year earlier in 2017. You'll figure it out.
Hello, everybody. It's time for another episode of Megan's Megacan. I'm Megan. I'm here with Ex-Berliner Magazine and Konrad Werner.
Hello.
Hi, Konrad. And also, very excitingly, we have a guest today. We have Veronika Nad. Hi, Veronika.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. You are a freelance anthropologist, which sounds so cool. And you do a lot of work for Blueprint for Free Speech, which is an Australian-based organisation, but do a lot of work here in Europe around whistleblowing and something called slaps, which is probably not as fun as it sounds.
No, it's not.
And you've worked on this all over Europe. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Well, Blueprint does a lot of research mainly, but we also consult governments on the proper introduction of, well, mainly whistleblower laws, but also freedom of expression legislation, some public campaigning whenever we get the chance.
Why don't you get to have a drink?
I've just realised after I posed that question and then I could barely listen to your answer, Veronika. I'm so sorry. I was like, there's no booze in my hand. I can't possibly talk about anything without alcohol. So I've got us all the same Megacan today. It's one of my favourites, but also I thought because we're talking about whistleblowing, we're going to be talking about kind of corruption and wrongdoing on a sort of huge systemic scale. And what says huge systemic scale of corruption?
Oh my God.
But the British Empire. So we all have a Bombay Sapphire and tonic with a picture of Queen Victoria on it. I washed them, which is why they've got a little bit of water on them, but I hid them back in my bag, so they were a surprise. So it's not just weird liquid from my bag, it's just water from Conrad's. Oh, I'm so excited. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Anyway, I want to know, what is a slap, Veronika?
A slap is what you do when you're in the legal environment where you're not technically allowed to, like either kill or put your journalists or civil society people in jail. So you sue them. And SLAP is short for strategic lawsuit against public participation. So you just pile legal cases of defamation, slander, libel on people that you would like to shut up, essentially. Yes.
It's like a gag law, kind of like gagging journalists from reporting on certain things.
Well, it's more like, distracting them with lawsuits and legal costs and
restricting their time.
Yeah, and often it works like this, that you file a lawsuit against them, and then that goes on for a few years in bad cases, and then because these are often based on nothing or they don't actually stand a chance in court, and so just shortly before the verdict is actually delivered, the companies just drop the case.
I'm already so angry. I can't even. I've had like one sip of gin, and you're even like talking sort of like vaguely hypothetically, not even relating it to what's happening in Germany. And I am like,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
But save your anger, because we want you to get angry about something else today. I just wanted to introduce the slap thing because it's just what Veronika's doing at the moment. But what Veronika generally does is a campaign on whistleblower law.
Yeah.
Which if you think you got angry about slaps, then just you wait.
But surely in Germany, like, it's fine. We have great Arbeit laws. Workers are protected.
Well, that's what they say.
No. What? Why are we here?
Right, so it's been in the news recently because the EU imposed a directive 2 years ago saying that all EU member states have to have a whistleblower protection law. So if you see wrongdoing at work, crime, abuse, sexual harassment, anything like that, you should be protected from the law, from your employer's retaliation, reprisal. You shouldn't be sacked, you shouldn't be demoted, you shouldn't be demoted sideways, like moved to another department, something like that. There should be a law protecting you from that. This is the EU said that. And not only the EU said that, but the UN has said it, the OECD has said it. There's been a lot of, in principle, everyone agrees that the G20, everyone agrees that this should be a thing. So...
I can't believe it's not a thing already.
Yeah, well...
What do you mean 2 years ago, EU? What? Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, it's been a thing in Anglo-Saxon countries, right? So you've had whistleblower laws in the US, and you've had the UK one is, 30 years old now.
Okay.
So
all right, but it's sort of just become this EU directive 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so
last December, the German Justice Ministry, led by the SPD Justice Minister Christine Lambrecht, she produced, or her department produced, a draft law which was leaked. And so it was in the news a little bit, a tiny bit of the news. And the CDU, who you remember are leading the government, Angela Merkel's CDU, who are the major partner in the government coalition, said, no, we do not like this law. Why did they not like this law, Veronika?
Because they didn't like the law because of the one thing that actually made the directive, well, not necessarily better, but just actually useful. The draft proposed to expand the material scope of what you can report on, because the European Union has a limited legal mandate to regulate on things, right? So the things that the member states agreed on dealing together within the European treaties.
Okay.
But these don't, this doesn't cover all issues that are usually otherwise covered in national law.
For example, data protection comes under EU law, I believe. But things like sexual harassment comes under national law. Right?
Yeah, or education or health or many other... Well, health is kind of half-half, I think.
Yeah. So essentially the CDU said, this is why it's so absurd. They said, well, we only want it to cover EU law because that's what the directive said. But obviously the EU meant it's supposed to cover all whistleblowers in any area, in any sphere of life. That would be the spirit of the directive.
But also because this was the initial idea of introducing the directive, right?
Yeah.
Because before that, you've kind of had highly fragmented protection throughout the different sectors and countries as well.
Yeah.
Because there's been whistleblower protection regulation, for example, in the finance sector, which is very, very easy to measure the impact of wrongdoing, right? Because you can just, you have actual money that gets lost.
Yes.
And so the idea was to introduce a comprehensive EU framework, also in the interest of protecting the internal market. But because of this limitation of the EU legal mandate, they couldn't regulate on everything that covers national legislation.
Okay.
But the EU also said, with the introduction of the directive, okay, but if you transpose this, so if you translate it into national law, bear in mind that you should expand the material scope so that your whistleblowers don't actually have to decide again, am I going to be covered by this law or not, by kind of making this assessment, is my problem covered by EU law or not?
Yes. So the CDU are once again putting this sort of legal responsibility to prove shit is bad onto individual people, onto the wee man, whilst protecting the big lads, to put it into my parlance.
Exactly. Well, this is what they've wanted, right? I've also heard, actually, I'm not sure that's true, that the coalition contract between the two parties actually foresees that EU law can or should only be transposed, I don't know, one-on-one or as is, and not expanded in any way.
Right. Which,
is another issue you can, if you want, get angry about. But I'm not sure this is actually, I haven't looked at the...
So it's caused a ruckus in the governing coalition.
What is exactly the point of the CDU? I just... What is... it's to protect the business, isn't it?
Well,
I keep forgetting this. God damn it.
Especially now, because of Corona, right? You got to protect them.
You
Yeah.
do.
Sure,
By
because
all
they were
means,
already
kick people
suffering.
out of their house, but if Lufthansa needs a payout, despite the fact that Lufthansa's business is setting the world alight and our young people will have no air to breathe, more money for them. Get out of your house. You owe your landlord €1,000. My landlord's 190. I'm going to not pay it as a protest and see what happens. Did you have a question? I'm very cross.
Yeah, exactly. So the people who are against this are not just the CDU, they're also the people that I spoke to when I wrote my article about is the BDA, the German Federation of Employers, and they represent all the business interests. And they said,
They're literally like the man.
yeah, here he is. I can show you a picture of the man.
He could not. Viewers, we need to put a thing like, imagine the man. This one looks more like the man than you could possibly imagine. What's his name?
Roland Wolf.
Of course it fucking is.
He is the labour law expert, the BDA, the Federation of German Employers, and he explained to me that any kind of
Spoke to him.
Yeah, on the phone.
Was he nice?
Well, it was business-like. We kept it professional. I mean, we didn't have a joke. He wasn't unpleasant either.
Well, that's about as best you can hope for from the man, isn't it?
We kept it. I only talked to him for about 10 minutes. Anyway, so
I mean, he
the
is
point-
talking to a journalist, right? So
Yeah.
he better be nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he said the thing is, I understand that there has to be a whistleblower protection law because the EU said so. So we have to do something. I get it.
It's an ethical thing.
Yeah, he doesn't actually want it.
Because the EU said we had to.
He said this draft law is completely wrong-headed because it goes way too far, and any kind of whistleblower protection law should only support reporting things internally. And he said, like, there should be channels for reporting things internally, and then we should support that. And it is important, and it is, we should say, in the companies' interests often to keep reports of wrongdoing internal because, then they can fix it without it causing like a big scandal, which is what it normally happens.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that in the first place, is there, right? I mean, if you have a safe mechanism and you have, your own unit to investigate whatever is going on, that's fair enough. And I, like, even on a personal level, I'm all for dealing with things internally if that's actually possible, and if whistleblowers don't suffer any reprisals for that. And there is actually, this is the interesting thing, whistleblowers do prefer taking their issues internally first, right?
Of
if they
course.
can,
Yeah.
because they do work in those places, they care for their own work environment, and if they have the trust that the things are going to be dealt with, then they can do that.
Yeah,
But
and we ultimately all want and hopefully things are maybe somehow in some workplaces moving in that direction where people can be more open to having conversations about things going wrong, and it's not like this whole disaster. And of course we would want to be able to have those in all of our workplaces and bring it up internally first and have it resolved. But the problem is that what if that doesn't work? And if you have a whistleblower law, to my mind, that only allows for internal things, then that's it is completely pointless, because what we need to deal with is the ones where it's not possible to do it internally. That's when the outside things need to get, and if every workplace worked in a lovely way and we all sat down and were like, oh, okay, well, we can work on this. Great, thanks so much, Bob, for bringing that up. That was lovely. Here, let's all have Megacans on our Feierabend, and it's great. It doesn't work like that.
Which brings us to what is actually in this law.
well, yeah, one of the big features, and also, I mean, in general, I would say this is already a big achievement of the introduction of the directive in general, is that companies have to establish internal channels. This, except for certain sectors, but there's never been an obligation to do that.
And that means like a hotline, right?
It means a hotline, it means like an online tool. The directive actually says you need to be able to go to a specific,
Person
like a
you go
compliance officer
Yes.
who takes in your complaint.
Yeah.
You should be able to make a report on the phone or via physical mail, I think, as well. So there's like different channels that should be open to whistleblowers, not anonymously, unfortunately, because the EU left that open and Germany decided to.
Well, let's talk about the issue of anonymity. So Roland Wolf of the BDA, he is against anonymity, the man, because he said that the problem with anonymity is if you're anonymous, you can report anything and no one can check if it's true or not.
Well, what does that mean? No, but of course.
Roland, you're absolutely, even I, a fool, a common or garden idiot who has wandered into this conversation with no background knowledge, can tell that is not actually true.
Well, I think there are two things about this. For one, of course you can if someone makes a claim, right, and you have a thorough investigatory mechanism within your organization, you can just verify that.
Exactly.
you just take the information, you look at it.
The only thing they're claiming is like who they are, and then they stay anonymous.
But this is the thing. I think the problem with this whole anonymity debate is that people are too focused on the messenger instead of actually looking at the message and seeing whether there's any substance to it or not. And of course, if someone just makes a wrong claim, then that's not a great thing.
But a truly terrifying thing for a man of his. He's the head of the group of employers, of German employers.
No, he's not the head of it. He's the head of the Department of Labour Law in the BDA.
Okay, so he's their top labour lawyer. He is saying that you cannot have legitimate claims of wrongdoing within an organisation from an anonymous source.
My guess is it's because then they would actually have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is what this is all about. That's fucking terrifying.
And what a lot of people don't know is there's like a huge emotional toll to taking this decision. They often get sacked, and then then it affects their families, and it's a lot of psychological pressure, especially in Germany, because there's a kind of you have to betray your co-workers in a way.
Because there's a strong culture of loyalty towards the employer that's also enshrined within a legal framework, right? And so you're kind of, whenever you speak up against your company, especially publicly you're sort of ostracized for betraying that loyalty.
So in this one, I spoke to this one whistleblower for this case. He was called Martin Porvol, and he was an accountant at a pharmacy in 2016, and he found out that his boss, this pharmacist, was diluting cancer treatment drugs. He was not only endangering the lives of all these cancer patients by giving them weaker drugs than they were supposed to be taking, he was also defrauding the national insurers.
He was just making them go further.
Yeah, and selling more of them, and then billing, and then he would bill the national insurers, the Krankenkassen, and he defrauded them of something like 50 million euros, and tens of thousands of patients were given weaker drugs because of this. And the rights and wrongs of the case all cleared up pretty quickly. The guy's in prison now for 12 years. But Martin Porvol, this accountant who found it out and reported it, and he spent a year collecting this evidence for the prosecutors. So he found out about it and then was secretly collecting the evidence and passing it on to the public prosecutors. And that was obviously a huge emotional burden, because during that year he kind of knew that patients were getting weaker drugs and everything.
God.
But he had to he had to stay in the job so he could collect the stuff. And then it all came out that the pharmacy was raided. The guy was arrested, but before he was arrested, his boss sacked him. He sacked Martin Porvol. That meant that this guy had no income, and because of the way German labour law is, your boss is just allowed to do that. Regardless, if you want to, you can be sacked in Germany, and if you feel like you've been wrongfully sacked, you have to go to court. The burden of proof is on you to go to court. So he spent years and years, basically, while this guy was in prison, and he won all his cases, but it took years, and he had and for the first 3 months he couldn't even get ALG 1. But the other thing is that no one would employ him, because other pharmacies saw him as someone who had betrayed their boss. They would, regardless of the rights and wrongs of the issue, they felt like,
regardless of the rights and wrongs of the issue,
they felt like he was untrustworthy. So he found it difficult to get a job. So that's why we need a whistleblower protection law, is what I'm saying.
Fucking right.
But it's interesting, it's not always, there are few cases, because we've mentioned Deltour before, right? The Lux Leaks whistleblower.
What was Lux Leaks?
Lux Leaks, there were agreements between the Luxembourg state and, all these big international companies that are based there, so that they would pay less tax in Luxembourg for having their their headquarters.
Amazon does this.
Amazon,
yeah,
eBay, I don't know, but lots of international
And this guy
companies.
exposed all this.
This guy worked for PwC, and before he left, he essentially took information on these deals. I think passed them on to the authorities or something, and then he was tried in Luxembourg for theft of these documents, which is another issue.
Yeah.
And during his trial in Luxembourg, they invited his new employer. Like, he found a job in France afterwards. He's French, moved back to France, found a job, I think, somewhere in the south, and they invited his new employer to testify in court in terms of like what kind of employee Deltour is, and whether they weren't scared to employ him because of, the way he had sort of cheated on his former company. And his employer said, no, what I want is employees who are actually telling us about things that are going wrong within the company so we can deal with them.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they just stay where they are and rot in place. And so that's actually, there's many employers who deal with this in the way that Martin Powell's employer did, and prefer covering up and pretending nothing ever happened. But
I don't even it's very, very interesting, and like most things that we talk about on here, I had like a vague idea what was happening and like what whistleblowers and stuff are, but it's just like it just beggars belief that this is up for debate. I mean, does it not?
Because you still have to deal with issues, right? Whistleblowing comes down to facing problems and instead of avoiding them. And I think as human beings, there's a tendency to, gloss over things and try and do that. And because you always have to actually face the stuff that you're not doing well.
I just mean the idea that we wouldn't want to have robust legislation around this, which of course we do, but that people would be kind of like arguing against that just seems mad to me. But I don't know why it surprises me, because this is just late stage capitalism. This is how the world works. And I'm just like constantly shocked by it.
No, but you have to, this is the thing, like you have to reform then. You have to look at what's going wrong in your organization, and you have to find a solution. And,
And the thing is, if we want to have that kind of culture, then, it's all very well saying we want to keep things internal for now, but that's just pretending like we have this sort of system in which, it's just...
Well, the internal thing is a bit... it's ridiculous on many levels because, you can just go to the police with crimes that you witnessed, right? So, like, adding that additional layer doesn't really make sense in the context of, the modern way we look at rule of law today.
Yeah.
And so this was...
It's so weird that, like, if I witness something illegal in the street on the way to work, I can go into the police station and that's fine and it's all cool.
Exactly.
And even sort of, for extreme things, there's like witness protection and stuff like that. But somehow when it happens within the workplace, it's...
But the good news here is that,
yes,
this is... whatever Wolf says, this is not debatable anyway, because the European Union, and when we did the campaign in Brussels, we've had long discussions about this with first the Commission and then later the Council, convincing them that, it doesn't make sense. You need to kind of allow people to also go to the authorities immediately if this is how you think your case will be resolved or how your issue will be most effectively addressed. And so whatever Germany does with this law, it's actually going to be against EU regulation to bypass this.
So the EU have said, no, you have to have it built in that people can go straight to thing, or do they have to do internal?
No, they don't have to do internal. Like internal and going to public authorities are on the same level, so you can choose. But there is an obligation.
It's not like you have to try it internally and then you get to go. Okay.
Both companies as well as public authorities have to introduce channels for people to report, and there have to be also additional external channels for like as a sort of a whistleblowing institution. And Germany was actually, there's another thing that was nice in the draft law, was that they suggested a dedicated external authority that takes in disclosures from whistleblowers who decide not to report internally. It's also a good thing because you kind of like have it all under one roof then.
Yes.
That's like a German government agency.
Yeah, well, it would have been linked to, I think, the Data Protection Authority.
Oh, okay.
Can you tell us a bit of, because you campaigned about this in Brussels. This is quite interesting for years, didn't you? You went to Brussels every other month and talked to MEPs and different people, didn't you?
I did.
What was your
fun.
impression of getting the EU to come round on this issue?
Well, it was interesting because I think civil society in general did a really good job in turning around the Commission on this, because I remember, I don't think in 2016, when it wasn't only our campaign, there were like 2 or 3 separate campaigns that in the end ended up, unifying their efforts.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, 2015 and 16, when this whole the whole debate started, the European Commission would say, no, we can't act on this. We do understand why this may be a problem, but we don't have a legal basis. It's always
because
the thing.
of their legal mandate within the EU, or just because...
No, I think it's a little more complex than that. But I'm not a lawyer, so this is where I'm also like, I just heard...
That's fine, but at the beginning they were saying...
There's no legal basis for this. And still...
We hear you, there's nothing we can do for you.
And there still isn't... I mean, they had to find one. And it was, I think, for some lawyers involved in this process, it was actually fun to, find different bits and pieces that they can just put together. And... So now the directive is based on different principles taken from the treaty. So there's not one legal basis or not one article that the whole thing is based on. But
it's like with your interpretation of those various ones.
Exactly.
Okay.
Plus, this is one of the things that I've learned in this campaign, is that the European Union is such a makeshift alliance, right? And these treaties, they're so incredibly vague in many places, and there's obviously a lot of stuff that you can do with those if you want to.
Yeah.
So it really came down to creating a public awareness for the issue, and also just really get on their nerves and say, no, you have to do this, it doesn't make sense. And so I think, I don't know, sometimes, so in 2015, 16, there was a very strong no. And then in 2 years or 1.5 years, the climate shifted entirely. And then the Commission introduced a first draft, early 2018. So fairly short time, actually. But
and this is the time that you were going there every other...
Well, 2018, and then, the Parliament voted on the final draft in April 2019. So, but 18 and 19, early 19 were crunch time.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that for us. No, seriously. But I know what you're saying, this... I'm kind of glad that is your experience of how the EU works. And if we get enough kind of thing, we're like, well, do you know what? Actually, we can make this happen if there's the public thing, and it's cool. And
it's been a very, for me personally, it's been a very inspiring experience because, I've always considered myself a European anyway. So, and I'm a big fan of there's lots of stuff that you can say about the EU that doesn't work. But it's interesting to see that, with the right support and good arguments, you can actually really...
We could actually start getting it to work for us rather than fucking Lufthansa.
Yeah.
Poor Lufthansa. They really like my symbol. But that's awesome.
So where, for us, it's unimaginable going to sort of...
how does it work?
Where do you write to an MEP and say, are you interested in having a meeting, or where do you...
Well, you do have a legal process, right? So whenever, usually you're a civil society, your friend is Parliament. Okay. And Parliament, it could have more power, but one thing that they can do, if someone sees a legal need, they can actually start preparing initial reports, first in the committees, and then suggest them to plenary and call upon the Commission to become active on the matter. And this is what happened in case of the whistleblowing directive, although... If I remember this correctly, the Commission had already started to get interested in the matter and done their own public inquiry on the issue, and these things happen. Sometimes these happen parallel.
Yeah.
So what we did was we contacted MEPs who were interested. We contacted other organizations dealing with the matter and pushing for the same goal, which was always a directive. So what helped, I guess, in this context was also that there was a very clear ask, right? We knew that this needs to be dealt with in the context of a directive. And so if you have this very concrete thing that you can ask of a more or less well-established set of institutions and unify behind that ask, then there's a good case to be made.
And you just keep asking over and over until you wear them down.
Yes.
Excellent work.
Thank you.
Which parties were most interested in talking to you?
The Greens and the Socialists.
Right.
I'm surprised.
No,
but it's always good to have affirmation.
No, and actually, so it's a bit ironic. So I want to say, like, in Parliament, the whole thing was spearheaded by a very interesting French MEP from I think in France, she's from the left, but in the EU Parliament, she was in the Socialist group. And her name is Virginie Rosière. And I think without her, Europe would not have this directive. And the irony of it is that she did this in the 4 years that she was in Parliament, and after that she wasn't re-elected. So she's out now, but she took this on when she came into office, and she ran it, and then she left. And she did a really good job in the Trilog discussions in the end, which, as you may know, are not very transparent. So you need a very strong Parliament position to go into those.
I was so excited because I finally worked out, after previous lovely people, Sophia included, that came on the podcast and was just like drawing me diagrams of the 3 parts of the EU. But now you've lost me. But that's okay.
What's the Trilog? What's that?
The Trilog is...
is that like a dialogue, but we're 3?
Exactly. It's where the 3 institutions of the European Union meet in the final stages of negotiations on any kind of draft.
Okay, and that's not very transparent.
It's not very transparent, no. And it's literally the people who've worked most on the issues in the previous process that, negotiate and make huge trade-offs on either side.
But Virginie went in and
yeah, but she was in a very, very strong position because civil society had supported her for a long time. And the Parliament, I have to say, like the draft that Parliament had agreed on, I don't remember when that was exactly. I think in late 2018 was also very strong and gave a very good, negotiation position. Oh, because I don't know, this is also just speculation on my end. So there were these committees, there was one committee that prepared a position of Parliament. They voted on it and then it went into the plenary. And then the vote was delayed for a week. And within that week, there was this Maltese journalist who got blown up.
Oh, gosh. Yes.
And in the end, when the full plenary voted, the EPP, so the Conservative bunch, abstained.
Rather than voting
against it. And if they had voted against it, then, the whole thing would have failed, and then it would have had to go back to the committee, then you would have had a watered-down draft from Parliament side, and then you would be in a weaker position in the Trilog negotiations. And I don't know, again, it's speculation, but I felt like, maybe this has something to, because there was such a strong call for stronger protection for journalists, whistleblower, freedom of expression.
Speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So.
Fascinating. I could get into the EU, Could do a little model one. It's all right.
What's your impression of the EU as how it works? Do you think it's like mad and difficult and over bureaucratic, or do you think that it works quite well, or what's your?
I want to say both.
Okay.
No, I mean it is a huge body, right? It is definitely overly bureaucratic, but realistically, I don't know how you will, unify and balance interests of 27.
It's 27 now.
27.
Was it 28?
It used to be 28, but now it's only 27.
I can't believe.
Let's not go on.
No, I can't. No, not today.
No, but I think honestly, there's a lot that's wrong with the European Union, but it's still a great institution, I want to say, and it's a terrific democratic experience still.
That's positive. That's good.
Well,
Terrific
So-
democratic experience.
Yeah.
If you take one thing from this podcast.
experience that.
The EU is a terrific is a great
I wanted
word.
to say experiment. I'm sorry. Not experiment.
That does somewhat change what
Yeah,
you're
yeah, I know,
saying,
I know.
but that's So just very quickly, Germany is drafting this up. The Ministry for Justice have drafted a thing, and the CDU's gone absolutely not. What do you think is the next? Like, what does the future hold for this? What's going to happen?
Well, they will have to introduce a law.
When's their deadline?
It's December
Right.
this year because
Okay.
you have 2 years of transposition period. And so December is the deadline, I think, I don't know, 17th, 19th, something like this.
Oh God, they're going to do it like about 2 weeks before Christmas when no one gives a shit. They're just like,
No, I mean, okay, so one thing...
I'm joking because that's what I would do.
No, but well, for once, Germany does have a history of delaying these kind of processes. So I don't know what the average is, but I think a year and a half delay in transposing directives that has happened. So it's some, and you just pay
So
fines.
like a year
but
and a
fuck
half
that.
after that thing,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
just
yeah.
get fined, and because Germany has more money than God, they just pay it. Oh my days.
Well, this is why it's really interesting this year, because if the Greens win this election that's coming in September, and the CDU delays, like it's a complicated situation now, because we're going to have a different government whatever happens after September. So we have to decide: is this government going to choose the new law, or the next government?
This government isn't, because they didn't find a solution, right?
Oh.
So they
whatever happens,
SPD proposed something. So the Justice Ministry proposed a law. CDU said we don't want the material scope expanded, and probably also a couple of other things that they didn't want. And so the SPD just withdrew the bill and said, okay, so we'll let the next administration deal with it.
Oh really? They're
Because
just
there's
like, well, if you
still
don't
time.
want this, I'm taking my ball back and no one's playing.
Well,
Yeah.
again, bear in mind that,
Understandably.
because the problem is that if you transpose it as is, it doesn't make sense. You're just going to make life for whistleblowers, it's going to
Yeah.
stay as difficult, if not even more difficult, because you have a law that's supposed to protect you, but you don't understand whether it's going to protect you.
So
or not.
what we're hoping for is our radical left-wing CDU out, get them out, like revolution on the 26th of September. That's what I'm going for.
Yeah.
And then it'll be like a whistleblower's paradise. We'll all be getting whistles.
It would be, I think, for whistleblowers in Germany, it would be a good thing if the Greens had a stronger position in the next government. That's for sure.
Yes.
The problem right now also is that, I mean, I've heard this somewhere. So the CDU, they're also not giving any space right now to SPD on this, right?
Because they're an absolute pack of dicks. I have no time. Like, I just can't. I cannot deal with them. Like, I'm so angry. You're just so mean, and all you care about is other people in suits, and I hate you all. Sorry, you were making a technical point about, like, facts.
You come along with your emotions.
God, but my emotions are fact-based. They just don't sound it.
No, but I think, I mean, if there was a at least halfway green government, chances are high that the draft, I'm not sure whether it's going to be improved. It depends. Like, in the end, this might have to be dealt with in the coalition contract immediately. And this is actually not a good thing, because it means that there's not going to be a public debate about it. They're just going to, deal with, like, worst case, CDU and Greens have to negotiate, the details that they haven't agreed on in the coalition contract negotiations
And we don't
behind
want that.
closed doors, and there's not going to be a parliamentary debate on it, which also sucks, because this would actually, in my view, be a good thing to have an open public debate about how we want to deal with whistleblowers and transparency.
That's
in
always
general.
an interesting public debate to have, because it's very much like a parliamentary debate, which is the people that are in power very much kind of debating our kind of rights to speak to them about their own sort of wrong. I just think that's a very interesting thing to have public debate about in a parliamentary thing, because I don't know. I can't really explain it, but you know what I mean. It's like an extension of the sort of. It's like another parallel to the whistleblower employee thing when we have public debate that's influencing parliamentary decision on something like whistleblowing.
But why it's interesting is...
We'll edit it out. Just edit me out. I've had 3 quarters of my Megacan.
The anything that comes after 20 minutes does not get edited. I just wanted to tell you that. Because I just can't be asked.
No.
But...
I feel if people make it past 20 minutes, they're like the hard.
Yeah, if you're listening this far, then you're in it now.
You don't care.
You're not gonna.
Try and explain again. No.
Well, I just wanted to make the point that it is an interesting thing that no one. The reason why I wanted to get Veronika on, and the reason why I wanted to talk about it in the first place, is because it's like we always have these big scandals in Germany, like Wirecard. We talked about Wirecard and Heckler and Koch. And Volkswagen, Dieselgate, all that stuff.
Aye.
And all that stuff, the one thing that those things have in common is a whistleblower, an anonymous whistleblower who makes it public.
Yeah.
And
a lack of transparency, right?
And a lack of transparency. So there's like a.
Oh, and the horrors of late stage scandals. There's a lot of that. But, yes.
So this is like one issue that unifies all those things, but it's never talked about in the press. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, because the press are. Yeah.
Well, I think one of what I found interesting was that in a debate I watched a few weeks ago, there was this CDU MP Heribert Hirte who said very blatantly, well, Germany is not a country with we're not a place with a strong transparency culture. And he just said it like, a fact that, and as if he was like, and that's okay.
It's
Even
amazing the
it's
stuff
not.
that like conservative sort of people will just say as if it's like, I'm like, have you been outside? Well, no, it's Corona time, so if they're old, they should not.
But there was what I thought was particular. There was no outcry about this, and there's no. So why? And also because if you look at the political agenda of the European Union in recent years, and bear in mind Germany still being the major beneficiary of this union,
Moneybags Deutschland.
Well, where in the EU you have a increasing recognition of the fact that transparency, proper rule of law are good things. They are helping. They are helping a democracy, and they're helping the people within the democracy, right? You have conservative MPs in Germany saying, well, yeah, but it's actually, never mind. So we're just not that strong on this. Fuck it. No.
It's just that really, really highlights just how extraordinarily out of touch they are. And I think that's what sort of startles me every time I think about the CDU. I'm just like, but they're just so they're just...
Well, are they? Because, it's still... okay, so we're in the Berlin bubble, right?
I know.
But the rest of the country, he does have a point. It's not something that is like transparency, openness, proper, culture of dealing with mistakes. These are not things that Germans are crazy about. And it's...
What's it gonna take, Deutschland? I say this with love. I love my adopted country, but fucking hell.
Keep your problems inside. Anyway, right. Don't ever confront your issues.
Don't ever do it. Don't
Bottle up.
ever do it.
Bottle up.
Okay. I think that's enough for today.
Well, yeah, because, and I say this with not... Oh my God, it's just started fucking pouring with rain. I was just about to say we might all be able to go now to the pub and sit outside, which is very exciting. And as the words left my mouth, the fucking heavens have opened. Dear God, what is the point of existence?
And with that question...
I think we really need to thank Veronika for her time.
Thanks, Veronika.
That was genuinely... fascinating. I'm horrified but enlightened.
I'm sorry about that, but thank you for having me.
It's not your fault. It is not your fault. Whose fault is it? All together now. Conservative politicians, it's all their fault. And capitalism. But thank you really very, very, very much. And I hope everybody gets to enjoy some Außen Gastronomie this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Even if it's in the rain.
No. No.
I cannot.
No.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe. Schnelltest. Außen Gastronomie.